Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel. I've been talking about different kinds of narcissistic relationships. I'm about to talk about a different one. And this one I'm going to call the boxing match. Not all narcissistic relationships are created the same. Just like there are different types of narcissism, there are also different types of relationships. And by spelling this out, you might be like, oh, now I can see some of the challenges in my particular kind of narcissistic relationship. So we're going to talk about the boxing match relationship. There are some narcissistic relationships out there that are basically endless fights that are punctuated with a few moments of peace, almost like the little space between rounds in a true boxing match. Everything is a fight. That's not surprising given the personality involved. But you might wonder, how does a boxing match relationship unfold? Version 1 of the boxing match relationship is when both people are narcissistic. Yes, it does happen, and I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. I'll be talking about that kind of relationship more soon. But both narcissists may be attracted to the charm, charisma, attractiveness, and the grandiosity of the other person. And things in these dual narcissist relationships go well until issues like jealousy set in, or if one person is more successful or getting more validation or is flirting with someone else, then bam, the gloves go on or they come off. And narcissistic people, we know they're not well behaved in relationships. But when there's two of them, and there's another narcissistic person in the relationship with them, there's no way we're going to see stuff like radical acceptance or regulation or realistic expectations. They just go at each other. It can get ugly, it is volatile, it may even come to violence or blows. Because you have two rejection-sensitive, ego-heavy, and really angry, dysregulated people, every day there is something more to fight about. I have clinically worked with narcissistic people in relationships who are in relationships with other narcissistic people, and we literally got nowhere in the work. It was clear that this person's partner would not change, nor would the client change. So it was like so every day was like Groundhog Day in hell. And every week I got to hear about new and more dramatic arguments. It was literally like the eternal recurrence. And honestly, I don't really care about these relationships unless the people have children. And then I get mad because the volatile anger going back and forth and the egocentric rage is really bad for anyone who's caught in the splash zone of these relationships, especially children. Now, version 2 of the boxing match relationship is someone who doesn't know about narcissism or who doesn't care. So let's face it, when any of us are facing up against gaslighting and lies and manipulation and hypocrisy and injustice, most of us want to scream. But because many people who get pulled into narcissistic relationships are actually quite empathic and quite conflict averse, don't like conflict, it doesn't work. But there are some folks out there who will not shirk from a fight, and so they keep getting into it with the narcissist. I actually think that the narcissistic person kind of likes the boxing match relationship. They love a fight. They like getting in the mud. They can regulate themselves better this way. And they may like seeing and then degrading the raw emotion of the other person. In some cases, believe it or not, the boxing match relationship may keep the narcissistic person a little more tamed. And in more than a few fights, you may see them becoming a bit victimized or surprised that someone is taking them on. But you have to be wired a certain way to be open to keep going at it with them. And it's pretty rare that people are. The boxing match relationship can sometimes look like the makeup, breakup, lots of calls from the neighbors, makeup sex, trauma-bonded nightmare. The volatility is how both people in the relationship regulate. And there may be lots of cheating and public fights and public messiness and yelling. It all kind of looks like a really down-market reality show. Again, no way is this ever healthy for anyone who has to be an audience to this kind of relationship. And most people in their social circle will burn out on hearing about and witnessing these boxing match relationships. In fact, these relationships are also not healthy for the people who are in them. If you are in a boxing match relationship, honestly, please consider getting out before it gets dangerous. And that's really targeted to both sides. I don't care if you're the narcissist in this relationship or not. It's like one of those apocryphal rock star relationships we'd read about in the magazines where there's sex, drugs, screaming, yelling, public spats. Again, they may be moderately entertaining, but these relationships are not good for anyone. Most of us would never dream of getting into a conflict with a narcissistic person simply because we've already learned our lesson and also because we know we can't win. The stress, the rage, the contemptuousness, and the awful things they would say, it's too overwhelming for most of us. So a boxing match relationship is not going to be the norm for the unfortunate empaths who get into relationships with narcissistic people. But not everyone who gets into a narcissistic relationship is an empath. And when two fighters like that get together, step away, whether the other partner is narcissistic or not. If you grew up with parents who had a boxing match relationship, that could actually have some really problematic long-term effects on you. Living in the fallout of that kind of verbal abuse and perhaps even physical abuse takes a toll. Sometimes people work in settings where there's boxing match relationships in the workplace and they're in play, and it really saps your concentration and your commitment to the job, as well as losing all respect for your screeching colleague. And if your parents are still married or other family members conduct themselves like this, the stress of being proximity to their loud, boisterous, volatile conflict can still impact you. I've witnessed these boxing match relationships. They are not pretty. I think just writing them off as two hot-headed people really misses and underestimates the damage that these relationships can cause, not only for the people in them, but for the people around them. So yes, while at some level these boxing match relationships can seem really sort of theatrical, they're simply unhealthy. And whatever the opposite of going deep is, people who are in the boxing match relationships defend, engage, explain, and personalize all the time. Some people say, I can't walk away from the fight. That's a choice, but rarely does it end up well. Thanks again.